All right, so tonight it's just me. I don't have a guest, unfortunately, but them's the breaks. So in that case, what I've decided to do is go over some stuff that I've been working on for the past 10 years that might be useful for a lot of people, you guys in particular, those that are taking courses. So tonight I'm going to talk about this. I'm going to share my screen. It's going to be really interactive. I'm going to move around a lot, so bear with me. Let me know if you can see my screen. Thumbs up if you can see my screen. Everybody see my screen? Good. Some people can. So, all right. So what we're going to talk about tonight is what I'm calling International Sustainable Development Reporting, which is essentially MEA reporting, multilateral environmental agreement reporting. The reason why I chose to do this is because some people know about this stuff, those that work in the policy world, but a lot of folks, even who work in industry and the general public, don't really understand or have not been shown specifically how all this stuff happens. When you see the news where you go, everybody gathers every year, or whatever it is, depending on the convention, in some remote country and city somewhere, like in Egypt, the next one, Sharm el-Sheikh, I think it's called, for the next climate change one, or Pyeongchang or Ordos or wherever. I've been to a few different places, Nagoya, and they gather together and they have all these meetings, and then they come up with some stuff, and there's like a micro news story, and then that's all you hear about it, like the general public. It doesn't get a lot of press outside of that. But what I want to go through with you tonight is just explain the mechanisms of how this stuff works, because it's actually quite important to understand for a couple reasons. It's important to understand, so you as professionals, those that are either working or want to be environmental professionals, it's important for you to understand at the global level how all this stuff fits together. And then I think it's important as well for just the common person who has any remote concerns about the status of the world, climate change and so forth, to see how this actually works. And hopefully it will alleviate some frustrations that you may have to see, well, why aren't things happening faster? And then also maybe shed some light on things that you were not aware of how it works. Okay. And then maybe you want to get involved with it, right? Because your companies can get involved with this, and individuals need to do this work. So there we go. That's the rationale. So what's the purpose of this? Well, the world is burning up, right? That's what we see on the news, and the forest fires happening in British Columbia and in New Brunswick for those in Canada. And elsewhere in the world, the land is going dry. We're seeing droughts and land degradation, or it's getting flooded. Biodiversity is plummeting. We hear all these news stories about how the world is just going to heck, right? Yes, there's a lot of media reporting about the problems the world is facing, but what is the real deal? That's the mission tonight, is to kind of cut through the noise and see what's the mechanisms and processes and protocols and procedures and methods to some degree of addressing all these big global issues, and then how does that translate to the local situation? Okay, how does it all work? And where do we look, and how do we hold leaders accountable? That's really one of the things I'm hoping to achieve through this session, is just to communicate to you, well, we have a role to play to hold leaders accountable, because ultimately at the end of the day, these are political and governance decisions that will help to kind of move things in a sustainable or unsustainable direction, and to do so in an intelligent way. Therefore, we as citizens need to understand what these processes currently are, and then whether they're working well, and if not, how they can change. Okay? So who the heck am I, and why listen to me? That's the next question. I could be some Joe, which I am, but well, my name's Dave, for most of you know me because I'm your prof, but so those that don't, this work, I'm a designer and environmental scientist, and this type of stuff, reporting and environmental management as it pertains to global governance, at the national, international level has been a core part of my outside business work since 2012. So about 10 years, maybe more than that actually, but specifically on this stuff, at least 10 years. And it started by developing regional environmental information management systems in the Caribbean. That was really the first kind of project in this regard. And then that just evolved from there. And previous to that, I was doing researchy type stuff that related to forests and so forth, but not really on this kind of formal government reporting. And then part of my research now is focused on the coastal zone part of this. So how does it translate from the macro view to the specifics of coastal zones and also the economic part of that? How do we put economic valuation to that? So, and this work is aligned with not only countries, so this work is not only to do with nation states, specifically what we do, my team and I and myself, but also at the global level with secretariats of multilateral environmental agreements. So it's not just working at the country level, because it's important to work at the country level, but it's important to work at the secretariat level as well. And I'll explain to you why that is as we proceed. Okay. So here's some photographic proof, if you don't believe me, of the participation that my team and I get in this realm of work. Okay, so this is in Ordos, China. Ordos is in Inner Mongolia, which is part of China in 2017. And this is at the Unccd, the UN Convention on Combating Desertification, the 13th COP meeting in 2017. And this is the plenary with all the countries and stuff like that. It was an earlier morning, so you can see not all the seats are filled. It takes a while for people to get up in Ordos, it seems. About half full, I guess. But this was a presentation of this specific stuff that I was asked to do by the UN there. So that's kind of, that says it all, like we kind of were involved. And that's me right there talking about environmental monitoring as it relates to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Unccd. Okay. All right. So I know a bit. I don't know. I'm not a ninja in this stuff, but I know enough to go to these conferences and talk about them. So hopefully that's enough for you. All right. So let's get into it. I'm just going to change this. So policies. So what about the policy side of this? MEAs are multilateral environmental agreements. Okay, so this is a multilateral, meaning many different directions. Multilateral means like there's more than one country negotiating over one stuff. You hear this all the time now from the Canadian government. We believe in multilateralism. We want to take a multilateral approach. How many has heard this multilateral in like from Justin Trudeau or Christina Freeland or someone like that? Yes, right? We believe in multilateralism when it comes to Ukraine. We believe in multilateralism when it comes to whatever, right? Essentially what that means is negotiating amongst different countries, more than one, right? Now, when you have two countries, what would it be? Someone type in that. Bilateral, bingo, there we go. Bilateralism, right? So you'll hear, for those that are like fully embedded in the policy world, it gets kind of funny because they say, well, we need to have some bilateral meetings about this issue, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, what that means is we're going to meet with someone else. So they get a little carried away. It's like, okay, you're going to meet with those people. Good, have fun, good meeting. So multilateral is multiple nation states working on an issue, and then bilateral will be nation to nation. So trade agreements often, if it's one-to-one, is a bilateral discussion. Canada, the US, Canada, Mexico, whatever. Trilateral, Canada, US, Mexico when it comes to NAFTA. So these are international agreements that are intended to promote sustainable practices and policies amongst nation states. In this case, it's an environmental agreement. There are three, well, that's just Amazonia we're dealing with. There are three frameworks that are particularly relevant to everywhere, not just Amazonia, because I've got the Amazon stuff up here, is UNFCCC, so UNFCCC, that's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay, so that's one multilateral convention agreement, right? It's a multilateral environmental agreement, the UNFCCC, because it's a convention, a legal convention. The Uncbd, the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, okay? And then we have the Unccd, which is the United Nations Convention on Combating Desertification, photos that I just showed you. Those are three of the main ones. Those are known as the Rio Conventions. They're all formulated in Rio de Janeiro, okay? In around 1992, not the Rio Summit is when they first started those ones, okay? So those are the main ones, and those are the main. There are other ones. So there's the Ramsar Convention on Wetlands. There's the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants. There's a Minamata Convention on Mercury. There is the Rotterdam Convention on Hazardous Chemicals. I think it's Rotterdam. There's a number of different ones. The Espoo Convention on Cross-Boundary Environmental Pollutants. So there are, but these are the main ones. These are the biggies that we deal with and hear about a lot. So I'm just going to focus on these ones. Otherwise, we'll be talking forever about agreements. All right. So I'm going to go through each one of these, and I'm going to flip around a bit to just show you, because what I want out of this is to, to know about this stuff, and then for yourself to be able to dig in if someone asks you about it, right? Say like, oh, well, we need to, what's going on with climate change? And you can just go to work. Okay, as a voter or as a professional. So the first one that I'm going to talk about is the UNFCCC. Yeah. So UNFCCC, and this is to deal with climate change, includes specific agreements that parties commit to in relation to greenhouse gas emissions. So when there's some sort of global agreement about what levels greenhouse gas emissions need to be at a nation level and what we strive to globally for concentrations in the atmosphere, this is kind of the convention that's going to handle all that stuff. So one thing you need to understand too about the conventions versus scientific bodies is these conventions are political and legal bodies. Okay, they are not necessarily like purely intended on scientific research, right? So when we hear about the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and the UNFCCC, those are two different things, right? They work in a complementary manner, but they are not the same thing, and they aren't designed to do the same thing. So the IPCC is a scientific body, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's a panel of scientists and social scientists who work on the different dimensions of climate change and study it to understand what is the status of that problem globally. And it's the results from the IPCC reports that then feed into this process for the UNFCCC, where governments decide what they need to do collectively through multilateralism and discussions and debates and all that good stuff. Okay, do you understand there's a difference between those two things? They're not the same thing. So there are people, climate change deniers will say the IPCC is a big kind of piece of garbage or whatever. They'll say, well, they're not designed to lobby. They're not supposed to. They're supposed to just do science and then produce reports. The political side is the UNFCCC, where these results are assessed and actions are determined and agreements are made. Okay. So within the UNFCCC, this convention, there are certain sub-agreements that come up, right? Like the Copenhagen Agreement, protocols. The Kyoto Protocol was part of the UNFCCC. It came through that process. And the last one that we have is the Paris Agreement, which was conceived in 2016 in Paris at the COP meeting, which kind of renewed commitments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and adapt to climate change. Okay. So within the UNFCCC, there's these reports I'll get into, but that's just one. This is climate change, UNFCCC, okay? Cool. Next one, Uncbd, UN Convention for Biological Diversity. So again, this is an international convention that different parties or nation states sign on to. They become, once they sign on to it, that means they agree to become a party to that convention, i.e., they're going to attend these meetings. They're going to work along with other nations to work towards the collective goals that are laid out within the convention text. So the convention is literally like a text document, okay? Global Agreement on Conservation and Sustainable Use of Biodiversity. In each one of these, they tend to have kind of broader goals that are set out every so often for like 10-year frameworks and so forth. In this case, we had the Aichi targets, which were targets for the conservation of biological diversity up into the year 2020. Okay, so those are the HE targets. There's 14 of them, and like goals, right? So those are done now. Like those are obviously expired because 2020 is 2 years gone. But now this post 2020 framework is in development, in the later stages of development, and there will be a new kind of stage of kind of goals to work towards. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of different parties involved in this process, so it's heavily kind of there's a lot of negotiation that goes on. Similar to UNFCCC, you have various reports that I'll get into and I'll show you that are done for each one of these parties. So what I want to get across tonight is, what does this stuff mean? Like, okay, like if someone says biodiversity is going to heck, how do I know that? And how do I look at that critically in the country I'm in or another country, okay? There's many challenges with accessing proper data. I'll get into that as well. And Unccd. So the Unccd is UN Convention for Combating Desertification. It's a global agreement to reduce land degradation. A lot of indicators relate to land covers, well, land quality. There's obviously some linkages between land quality and biodiversity, as well as climate change, right? So there's periodic reporting that they need to do that I'll show you as well. So one thing that you're hopefully starting to see is that there's connections between these conventions, and they call them synergies, right? And this is an increasing, you hear this more and more and more from the UN General Assembly, as well as from the executive secretaries of each one of the conventions. How do you kind of tackle two birds with one stone, right? So for instance, conserving biodiversity is in essence also dealing with climate change, because you're avoiding deforestation in some cases, and therefore avoiding the emission of greenhouse gases by degrading that land, right? So you can see there's multiple benefits from looking at things across these conventions. There we go. I was just talking, I should go over these slides before. So as I was saying, the challenge is coordinating efforts amongst different agencies responsible for reporting and enforcing the actions. This is a big issue, is how do you coordinate amongst different agencies? And we'll look at that. And SDGs are also important benchmarks that align with these. So we'll talk about the SDGs as well. Sustainable Development Goals are broad global goals relating to sustainable development as a whole, not just environmental factors. Okay, UNCBD. We'll start with the CBD because it's one of my faves. So this is a convention that is critical to the natural heritage of the planet, deals with biodiversity at different scales. This is important to understand. Biodiversity is not just different species in an area. It's variation within species, it's genetic variability and so forth, and also ecosystem diversity, functional diversity of ecosystems as well. So we need to understand that what we define as diversity, biodiversity. Also included in the UNCBD are issues not just about the conservation and sustainable use of ecosystems and conservation of biodiversity. It also addresses things such as biopiracy and intellectual property theft. So this was a big issue. Well, it still is an issue, but it was a bigger issue before the Nagoya Protocol, so pre-2010. So anybody know what biopiracy is? Raise your hand. Someone knows what biopiracy is. Give me an example of what biopiracy might be. Type it in the text box. What would that be? Theft of TEK? Close, yeah. Yeah, specifically though, GMOs, getting there, genetics. Both of those actually, not GMOs, but genetics. So Scott, like what if someone learned of like this traditional knowledge of cure for, I don't know, skin rashes? They're in the Amazon and they're talking to some indigenous people, and they noticed that they took this leaf off the tree and then mashed it up and then rubbed it on the rashes, and then within a day the rash went away, right? And they go, wow, look at that. How's that work? Right? And just so happened this person was from Europe, from Switzerland, one of the places that is well known for using these kind of approaches, or at least pharmaceutical industry. So there has been examples of people or companies seeing that, saying, wow, that's interesting. How does that work? Let's take a leaf, take that, go back to the lab, synthesize it, break it down, determine what the genetic components of that are and why it does what it does, synthesizing it, commercializing it, and then legally protecting that so that no one else can use that chemical natural product for the purposes that you've commercialized it for, right? So that, and then blocks other people from doing that, particularly those that live on the land. Exactly. It's creating a patent on genetic material that is not yours. It's not from your land, from elsewhere, right? So this was something that's coined biopiracy, but essentially what it means is patenting and protecting and basically taking natural remedies or genetic material from other countries and then commercializing it and protecting it for your own commercial purposes. That was a big problem, and it still is, but I mean, there is now increasing scrutiny over that, and that came about in 2010 through the development of what's called the Nagoya Protocol. Okay, that was in Nagoya, and in fact, I was at that conference. It was my first time going to one of those meetings, and this was a well-known phenomenon that was occurring. And the problem is that who benefits from that, right? Where did the benefits from that natural product go? Well, they ended up going to those that patented that genetic material and then commercialized it, and not to those who were the stewards or living on the land or whatever. So based on that, the Nagoya Protocol was created, which is a legal protocol that outlines a process for access and benefit sharing, ABS, access and benefit sharing of genetic material that comes from these kind of environments. And therefore now there is a process by which when you go to these regions and conduct scientific research or sampling, you have to get free and prior informed consent from those that live on the land. And if you're going to extract and potentially commercialize, you have an ABS agreement put in place, an access and benefit sharing agreement put in place with those that are the owners or stewards of the land, that the benefits are shared. Okay, I'm simplifying the explanation of that, but that's essentially what it is. It's ABS, and there's whole ream of protocols that have developed as a result of that because it's such a big issue. Okay, it's basically piracy to some degree. Okay, so you can Google, and I'll walk through some of this stuff so you can see what is ABS, how to learn more about it, and so forth. So the Secretariat, there's the legal component of that, and then there's the governance of ABS. So how does that get governed? Okay, and I'll show you how that works at the country level and at the Secretariat level. So parties attend the COP meetings, they attend the SBI, back to the Uncbd. COP is a conference of the party. So this is a meeting where the parties, so legal signatories, countries, get together and talk about the Convention on Biodiversity. They also have sub-meetings, SBI in the case of Uncbd, which is a strategic body for implementation, and SBSTA, strategic body for science, technology, and technological application, I believe. So the SBSTA is a little more technical. It's about the science behind biodiversity, the technology, and so forth. SBI is more about policy implementation. So one's more procedural in policy, one's a little more science and tech. Okay, and those are sub-meetings. There's a COP meetings, and then you have, like every year, you'll have an SBI or SBSTA where the people who are working on this stuff at the country level go and attend. If you get a chance to go to these meetings, I highly recommend it as a professional. You'll learn a lot. It's really interesting. You can go, you just have to go apply and be I think you would go as a member of civil society. And so that allows you access to the plenary, so forth. The next one is in Montreal for the Uncbd. So it's in December. I would recommend trying to go if you can. So reporting, Uncbd. Biodiversity is a tricky thing to report on. So I'm speaking from experience and looking at these reports, a lot of them. National biodiversity reports summarize the status of biodiversity in a country. So all the parties are required to submit national biodiversity reports on a periodic basis. I will show you, I'm going to switch and show you some of these. And they're tricky to do because there's a lot of material. If you think about all of the biodiversity in a country and certain issues that need to be documented, you have things related to red list species, species that are threatened, measures to conserve biodiversity, you have invasive and alien species. These are the issues that are documented in a national biodiversity report. NBSAPS is the National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan. So it's another required document by a party to the convention. And that is a document that outlines what a country is going to do to achieve the targets laid out in the convention, right? So this is what we're going to do. Before, it was mostly aligned with the HE targets up to 2020. So a country would write their NBSAP and say, this is how we're going to achieve target 14, 13, 12, whatever. So it's more of like a plan of attack. It's difficult to standardize biodiversity reports across countries, and just because of the nature of the data and the nature of the issues that you're reporting on. So this is probably, of the three conventions we'll talk about, this is the trickiest one for systematic reporting, just because, you know, it's, I don't know, I mean, it's tricky, like some of the things, it's hard to compare these criteria across different countries. And then often difficult to have quantitative data, as much of the issues are qualitative or contextual. So a lot of this is descriptive. You know, it's not like you're measuring a bunch of things. I mean, those of you who are biologists, I'm sure you've done biodiversity analyses before, where you do like a transect and, you know, species diversity indices and indexes and measures. You can do that, but a lot of this is contextual, qualitative, descriptive, talking about the status of species and so forth. Okay, and I'm going to switch as I do this. I'm going to go and show you, because I want to make this as real as possible. So that's CBD. Okay, so let's look at this convention as CBD. So if you want to learn about this, boom, we're going to go to, this is the website for this convention. Okay, so if you start to work on this, this is the first place you go. And here we're going to look at, just if you want to learn about it, you can go read about the Biodiversity Convention, about the Secretariat. The Secretariat is the headquarters. Okay, the headquarters for this convention is the Secretariat. The Secretariat has staff. They have a lot of people. They have an executive secretary, so the head of that convention, and they have a number of different people. I don't know how many, but maybe 100 or so, who work at the Secretariat, who handle different parts of this. If you think about it, there's a lot to manage when you're talking about a global process for governing biodiversity and facilitating dialogue, right? You need to facilitate meetings, discussions, and so forth. So all of that stuff is coordinated through the Secretariat, which is in Montreal. And within the biodiversity, you have these different protocols: Cartagena Protocol, Nagoya Protocol for access and benefit sharing, the countries and the different programs. Okay. So if you're really interested in this stuff, I would suggest going and looking into the convention itself, and they have the history and so forth. Post 2020, see, they talk about what's happening post 2020. You can go and look at all the parties. The parties are all the countries that have signed on. Okay, so we have like Afghanistan, and then we have whether they've been ratified the convention or not, all the way through. So you can see we've got 100 and how many do we have here? 196 countries. So America, United States, is not a party to the convention. You can go through and look at their profiles and so forth. All right. So this is, each one of these countries has national focal points. So the focal points are the people that are responsible for each one of these: the Cartagena Protocol on biosafety, access and benefit sharing protocol. This is the one related to biopiracy and so forth. And then you also have a focal point for the Convention on Biological Diversity. This is a big one. This requires the most work. So these focal points are the people within the country, usually a group. In Canada, we have a bigger group than, say, St. Lucia or someone. In a smaller country, like a small island developing state, you might have one or two people maybe working on this stuff, and they draw on information from others. But the focal point is the one who will go to these meetings. They'll be the main point of contact with the Secretariat, and they will be responsible for gathering all this information together, and anything related to the convention, they will then be the focal point. They'll be the one that'll pull it together. Okay. So that's the national focal points. You have NBSAPs here. So these are I mentioned this, the National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plans. Now, these are the reports that have been submitted by parties that outline how they're going to go work towards achieving the goals set out in the protocols and the convention. Okay. So there we go. So that's kind of just general governance stuff. And within, if you want to learn more about specifics, you can go and look at the Nagoya Protocol, for instance, if you're interested in access and benefit sharing. This is on access and benefit sharing. This, I would recommend reading this. This is a Nagoya Protocol itself. It's a short read, this one here, which outlines the actual protocol text. And then you also have some material related to, look, you have a lot of stuff here about the Nagoya Protocol, the history and so forth. And then you also have key issues, which is the clearinghouse, the reporting procedures for countries and so forth, et cetera, et cetera. So at a country level, you'll have ABS requests. So like whenever a group wants to do research in a country, like say Antigua and Barbuda, they will submit an ABS request to go and do and sample like forest or genetic material or whatever. Okay. Or if there is some sort of commercial activity, that is going to take place that involves natural capital, like maybe synthesizing a natural remedy, then to do it officially, you would go through the Nagoya Protocol and have the proper agreements in place in order to do that. Okay. All right. So this is the Secretariat. Like this is, you know, the overall governing body. Okay. So if we're interested in looking at this at then the national level, if we want to say like, let's have a look at the documents, I'm going to see if I can quickly find them here. I'm going to try and find, pick a country. Someone give me a country. Let's make this interactive.
Iran.
Iran, boom, done. I hope they are, I think they are, yes, they are. The Islamic Republic of Iran.
I'm surprised.
Well, Iran is like, funny enough, Iran and Iraq. So that photo I showed you from Ordos, that presentation in 2017, I presented what we had done for St. Lucia, the software. And it was Iranians and Iraqis, the reps, the focal points for the Unccd immediately came up to me after the presentation and were just like, they loved it. They're like, oh, we love this. And I was just surprised because it was just, you know, I would expect, you know, a different country to be more kind of, you know, forthcoming with their interest in what we were working on, but it was great. I mean, they're super friendly, super nice. Okay, so we go to Iran, Islamic Republic of Iran. You can see here the convention. They've been a party since 1996. They've ratified the Cartagena Protocol. They're a non-party on access and benefit sharing, which is interesting. Blah, 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 blah. So you can get all their kind of overview information, but the stuff that's most interesting to us, they have a national website. So we can go here and see what Iran is doing for biodiversity right now. Let's make this real live and dynamic. Boom, we're going to go and see. I've never been to this site, nor have I looked at Iran stuff. So this is exciting for me as well. And see what happens here. And this will be the site. Typically, often it will be the Ministry of Environment for a different country. I'm not sure what it will be for Iran, but we'll see. And this is what will be front facing. It's not like there's no firewall. It's just, this is where they present their biodiversity related information. Pretty slow.
David, are this information reliable, or can countries, you know, make up facts?
Well, you know, I mean, this is a really good question. And if anybody else has questions, just shoot. We're going to make this like informal. They're about as reliable as we're going to get. There's no third-party audit of this stuff. So there's not like, you don't like produce your biodiversity report and then a third party from the UN goes and like looks and checks all the stuff on the ground in the country. There's a high degree of kind of goodwill and trust that needs to go into these processes in order for it to work, you know. So this is one of the things I want to get across tonight as we go through this is the benefits and the drawbacks, like where are the strengths and the weaknesses of this whole process. So one of the strengths is the fact that it occurs. Like how else are we going to solve global biodiversity problems without having some sort of global body where people get together and talk about this stuff, negotiate and come to some form of agreement as to how to move forward, right? We need that. We need that form of platform. The downside is, who's the police? Like, who is going to police this process? At the convention and at the COP meetings, the discussions and so forth, those are okay. I mean, those are handled through diplomatic processes and so forth. But who's to say that whatever Iran is submitting is legitimate or not, right? I mean, I think that's what your question is, right? Like how do I know that this is like accurate information? We kind of have to trust the process. That's the part of the downside with this. Now, this is really slow. I don't know why it's so slow. Anyway, we'll wait for that to come up. So that's their website. But the thing that will be interesting here is the National Biodiversity NBSAP. So this is, if you want to know what's going on in a country about biodiversity, the things you really need to, maybe the website, definitely you need to look at their reports, okay? So let's look at the NBSAP. So this is the Islamic Republic of Iran revised National Biodiversity Strategic Action Plan between 2016 and 2030. So we're about halfway along, maybe a bit short of halfway for this NBSAP, right? So this document is, what pages it is? Let's see. Contents. It's pretty lengthy, right? So I'll just skim it quickly. And what this document is, it's an outline. So you have forwards, talks about what the land is and so forth. And then you have the co-authors, like who authors. So these, I mean, who's to say that this is false? Well, you have like the head of, you know, this Dr. Dabiri, Dr. Fazil. This is a pretty peer-reviewed document. You have a lot of well-established scientists that are contributing to this. So to fudge the data or what have you in this, you know, I would think it would be a stretch. I think these are very peer-reviewed. Unless, of course, someone really had it out to falsify it, then it could happen. So what you see in these documents, I won't go through all of it, but what this talks about is just the issue, the distribution of species, what is the distribution, some map data, and so forth. But most important for this, I'm going to go back. Typically, the first section is context stuff. I'm going to go to the contents here, lessons learned. Institutional, the framework, let's go forward a bit. You can see here the targets. So here we go. So this is important here. If we look at this, okay. So consistently across countries, the NBSAPs were designed to align with the national targets, the HE targets. By 2020, National Strategy for Formal and Informal Education Systems, this is strategic goal 1, mainstreaming of biodiversity across government, promoting awareness and participation. This is more about public awareness. And then you have national targets within this strategic goal, which was aligned with the HE targets that the country comes up with, right? And then they have the action plan. So like here, by 2020, knowledge and awareness of specialists and experts for effective management of biodiversity are enhanced. And then they have here these action and measures that are going to be implemented in Iran. Training courses will be conducted, for high-level decision makers, et cetera, et cetera. So we can go through this from start to finish to see, like here, national target by 2030. This is a strategic goal, reduce pressures on biodiversity by promoting sustainable use of natural resources. Their target here is by 20. So this one here was strategic goal 3, aligned with the H targets. By 2030, the rate of loss of natural habitats, in particular forest and wetlands, is at least halved, and degradation fragmentation is significantly reduced, and they have specific actions within this, okay? So for instance, if you're starting to work on biodiversity in Iran, this is one thing you look at to say, okay, well, what have they planned to do? Are there any consequences if governments falsify such? Are there consequences? The biggest consequence of any of this stuff, never mind if you falsified the data or say if it's the true data, but you've done nothing, like say, and we'll get into this with climate change, the consequences is shame. And say, okay, well, you're not pulling your weight. There's no like financial penalty necessarily, or, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't really work like that. It's more about diplomatic consequences, right? Like you're not pulling your weight type of thing. And this is a weakness of it, actually, okay? So this is an NBSAP, all right? That's an important document for biodiversity. And then the other document is the national report. So the NBSAP is more about what are they going to do? As you can see, I showed you, they lay it out. What are the strategic objectives? And then what are we going to do as a country to achieve these objectives? Now, that's kind of nice. This is what we intend to do, but what have you done? What's going on? This is where you look at the national reports, okay? This is the clearinghouse mechanism, 6 national report. Okay, and we can, oh, this is good. So this is a little more systematic now, thankfully. This is laid out like this in kind of more of a PDF format, but or a form format, I'm gonna just pull the PDF. Okay, so if you want to figure out what's going on in Iran, then this is what you would look at. This is a 75-page, the national report for the Convention on Biodiversity from Iran on what is the status of biodiversity. You can see information on targets, you can implementation measures, assessment of progress towards each national target, description, blah, 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 blah. So we can look at, let's look at this, assessment of progress. Okay, so we can, this allows us to look at Measure 18 environmental impact assessment, and it explains how they're going about doing certain aspects of this. So monitoring projects are subject to EIAs, conduct continuous monitoring of how and what extent the conditions set forth in the environmental permit for project are met by supervising working group, et cetera, et cetera. So for any component within this, like for instance, sustainable fisheries, target 5, HE target, this lays out what they've been doing and what they've managed to do to achieve these targets. Now, as we scroll through this, what do you notice? What jumps out at you? So this is one here for, these are conservation measures, preventing extinctions, that this one is here. So we have a gene bank. This is what they've done to prevent extinctions. They've established a gene bank, number of specimens in there, identify endemic species, conservation management action for falling species. So they've had conservation plans for brown bears, black bears, et cetera, et cetera. Monitoring tagging of marine turtles. Okay, good stuff. Sea turtle hatchery, blah, 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 all the way through. All these things that they're doing to avoid extinctions, agricultural biodiversity. So what do you notice here though? Like what does this jump out at you? No targets. Yes, good. Yeah. There's no standard. Yes, that's what I'm trying to get at. Thank you, Melissa. Sorry, Karen. So, thank you both, Melissa and Karen. There's no, it's not that systematic. That's the issue. You say, well, what are we doing here this is to address extinctions, right? Preventing extinctions. These are all kind of anecdotal actions. We've got a gene bank, we're monitoring, we're doing a conservation project over here, blah, 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 blah. Right? So this is one of the challenges with biodiversity in the sense that it's hard to systematically, imagine if we're trying to say globally then, okay, globally, what are we doing to prevent extinctions? What if that were the question you were to ask right now? How would you answer that question? You'd have to go through all of these reports. You could query, because it's better organized now than it was before. It used to not be like this, just PDFs. You could pull out all of these actions for preventing extinctions across all the parties, sift through that and come up with some sort of meta-analysis, but is not still, that would take a lot of work, right? So this is, I think it's a problem because the nature of biodiversity is like that. And then also, but at the same time, we kind of need some more systematic analysis. You understand? It's this kind of, is it possible and what can we do to be more systematic? All right, so this is an example, and you feel free to go and take a look at other biodiversity reports of different countries. You can go and we could go and look at, if we wanted to go and choose another country, let's do Canada quickly. Let's just go and look at Canada. Why not? And we will go boop, 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 Canada, bang. Okay, and this is going to pull up Canada's version. And you say, here's an MBSAP, so we get the French or the English one, depending on what you want. There's a national website, and you can get the 6th national report. You have that we can go to right away. It's in the clearinghouse mechanism. Same thing. It's going to go right to this platform, and this is going to be all the information for Canada, right? Outlined here. And we could go. Let's go down to 12, preventing extinctions, and then we have about the blah, 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 blah. And then this is, yeah, develop collaborative, and they just go on about this stuff. And then they have a bunch of links related to species at risk. So these are all like province of Manitoba, species at risk, province of BC. So it's even worse actually for Canada here. If you wanted to gather Canada's information and roll that into some sort of global systematic report, look at what you'd have to do. You'd have to go to all these sites and figure out what they've been doing, in addition to, and marry that with Iran's data, and then somehow come up with some sort of like coherent global picture. So you're starting to see the problem with this stuff. It's good that we have these things, it's necessary, but to like really have a good handle on where things are at globally, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Okay. All right. So that is biodiversity. Okay. Difficult to have quantitative data, as I've shown you. As much of these issues are qualitative or contextual, as shown by the biodiversity reports from Iran and Canada. Okay. Next, Unccd. Land degradation, okay? There's no standard on what exactly they need to report on. There is, so they receive like a guidance document on what to report on, but at the same time, it's not as didactic. It's not like they say, we want you to, so these units of this. For biodiversity, it doesn't get to that level of specificity in terms of like, when I say didactic, meaning like prescriptive. You need to report on this in this way. I'm going to show you, like now I'll show you Unccd. This is, you're going to get the full meal deal tonight on how this all stuff all works. Unccd is a different story. Okay. So Unccd, so biodiversity problematic, and guess what? Biodiversity and ecosystems is in code. Where is it in terms of the planetary boundaries, right? According to the scientific research, IPBES, the Intergovernmental Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, big problems, massive losses of species. So in order to combat that and to address that, we need to have good systematic data. So this is an issue that we need to come up with. How do scientists end up being a part of these conventions report generation? Are they selected or they apply? So they're selected. So for each country, good question, Christina. So for each country, the focal point will draw on the scientific resources within their country that are best suited to report on whatever it is. So invasive and alien species or whatever. There's usually a scientist at the universities who's a specialist in whatever, right? And they will be called upon to contribute to that report. So I'll give an example, like in Antigua and Barbuda, who work very closely with them on their reporting procedures. For the access for their invasive species, there was this guy, forget his name, Mr. Jones, I forget his first name, Jones. And he was the invasive species person for the country. He just knew all about that stuff. Consultant, he wasn't a university professor, but he independently worked on invasive and alien species, worked with all the farmers, and every time they do the biodiversity report and they have to document what's happening in invasive and alien species, boom, they phone him, say, hey, we need to do this report, please come in, give us an update, go, whatever, do what you need to do. So that's how it works. They're selected by the focal point, usually, of that country. Okay. Onward. Unccd, land degradation. Okay. Big convention. Another one. Originally conceived to address desertification. So Canada would have scientists they call upon from each one of the provinces. We're a big country, so I think we need to cut ourselves a bit of slack with our biodiversity report because it's, there's a lot less information for other countries, and Canada's a big place. We've got a lot of biodiversity. Unccd, originally conceived to address desertification. That's what's called the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, 1993. 92 at the Rio Summit, came into effect in 93. Evolved to include all forms of land degradation today. So it deals with all land degradation today, deals with drought, depletion of nutrients, deforestation, anything related to deforestation, not just desertification. Desertification was, in places like Saudi Arabia, the Middle East, in northern China, Mongolia, Gobi Desert, that kind of area where you get this kind of movement of desert. That was originally one of the big concerns, but now it's just evolved because land degradation as a whole is a big issue globally. Countries need to report on their efforts to address desertification and land degradation. Parties attend the COP meetings, the CRIC, etc., and do similar to what they do for the Biodiversity Convention. So land degradation is a bit more systematic than biodiversity, as I'll show you. They have provided global data sets for parties that are not able to get their own data. This is what's global satellite data that they've provided. So the Secretariat, provides this data if countries need it. And then they also provide soil data, the key things that they need to report on. It's available to them. So there's no country that doesn't have like land cover data. Every country has at least the global data sets. Now, if it's a well-developed country, like some countries like Russia or places like this, they really want to do their own things. They tend to have their own data sets. But for countries like Antigua and other smaller states that don't have as much technological capacity, they will use the global data sets. And the downside is it's coarse resolution, like it's like a big pixels, so like a 1 kilometer, I think, or 2 kilometer spatial resolution, but nonetheless, it can give you this picture of what's going on in the world. Scott, I know the big worry in Amazonia is savanization with deforestation. I'm assuming this would also fall into the land. Yes, it does. Absolutely. Falls into both. You have the Convention for Biodiversity, all three, actually. That's a synergistic question. I could talk a lot about that if you want. I spent 3 years working on it, so I know I know a bit about that whole process. The savanization the Convention for Biodiversity would deal with the biodiversity and land cover change part of that, like loss of biodiversity. The Land Degradation Convention would deal with loss of land cover, and I'll show you. And in fact, we'll look at Brazil's LDN report. They'll show you the change in land cover. And then also the Climate Change Convention, the UNFCCC, would also deal with that in terms of land degradation that leads to the emissions or lack of sequestration of carbon. That's also documented in UNFCCC reports. So that's the conversion or loss of Amazonian rainforest is a synergistic issue that covers all three of the main Rio conventions. Good question. So this course resolution, but there's uniform cover. That's the beauty of this stuff, of the Unccd. It's uniform and it's course resolution, but they can get a good picture of what's going on with land degradation. It's somewhat reliable, right? So issues such as soil organic carbon, land cover change, also socioeconomic variables are included in the reporting to the Unccd. They use something called PRAIS, P-R-A-I-S, which is similar to that system I showed you for CBD for the reporting, and it collects the reports very uniform in their format, and therefore it helps with consistency across the different parties. And the global goal, one of the goals in the Unccd is land degradation neutrality, so net zero land degradation by the year 2030. And so I will then show you what that's all about. Okay, so let's exit this. We're going to go over to the Unccd. So we were on Uncbd. Let's go to Unccd here. So the Unccd Secretariat is in Berlin. With CBD reports mention genetic deforming current species due to possibly. I'd have to look. I would think that might be addressed. I would expect. I'd have to look at that though. I'll make a note of that. This is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Okay, find out all about it here. You can go to our work and impact, science, the convention, blah 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 blah. The key things that we want to look at here are what are the countries reporting on. Let's follow the same kind of logic. Okay, so data and knowledge. I'm just winging this right now. Here we go. So praise country reporting. Remember I said praise? That's praise right there. They have a bunch of tools to support the countries in these. So sustainable land management, best practices and knowledge sharing systems, the profiles of the countries. There's a long line categories, a drought toolbox, because drought's a big part of this, right? So let's go to this country profiles. And let's, how about we stick to Iran and Canada for now, just because we want to stick to the same theme. And we can start to look and see what these countries are doing, right? And go on, and hopefully Iran is like, I am 99% sure Iran is a party, because I believe it was them. Can you hear me? Yes?
You just keep cutting in and out a little bit.
Okay, I'll speak slower. It's because I'm speaking fast. All right, so we want to find out a country. We're going to look at Iran. G-H-I, ooh, there we go. Iran. Okay. Drought planning. Central and Eastern Europe. Yeah. Asia. Okay, we're going to look at Asia. Okay, and we can look at Let's choose Iraq. Come on. Okay, we're going to look at the reports. On the methodologies and so forth. Platform. Portal. Oh. Okay. I think we need to find the reports themselves. I'm just trying to find the actual report for a country. I have them, but I'm going to try and find it on here. They're called the ACP, the Affected Country Party Report. Okay, what I'll do is I'll pull up an example rather than go through this. So there's three main reports. You have the ACP, Affected Country Party Report. Pull up an example. GI. Can you hear me all right? Okay, production. I'm going to show you Antigua's. Unccd. There we go. It's a national action plan. There we go. So these are two plans from Antigua, which are, just a sec, we're going to pull this up. You have to open these in Acrobat because they're these fill-in type forms. So I'm going to pull it up. So this is 2018. There we go. So here we go. This is the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Performance Review and Assessment of Implementation. This is from PRAISE, submitted to PRAISE. It's called their ACP report, Affected Country Party Report, which basically outlines how they're doing with land degradation. So PRAISE is an automated system, well, not automated, but it's a system you log on and then you enter the data into it and then these reports are created. So you can see here the contents. So this is way more systematic than biodiversity tends to be. So you have the strategic objectives and the indicators that are uniform across the countries, trends in land cover, trends in land productivity, trends in carbon stocks, and then they align with the SDGs. Same with this, improve living conditions, mitigate droughts, global benefits, blah, 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 blah. So I'm going to just show what this looks like. So you can see here, this is the land area demographics, this is background information, strategic objective 1-1, trends in land cover. This is one of the key variables for land degradation globally. So they enter this data, right? This is the quantitative data that they enter as countries. As Antigua entered this, and they have from 2000 to 2015, and they have tree covered, grassland, cropland, wetland, surface is another, and how that's changed over time. So you can see that, say, wetlands were 45 kilometers squared back in 2000, and they're 42. So you have -3 kilometers squared change in wetlands, -3 kilometers squared change in croplands, an increase in grasslands, decrease in tree covered areas, and then increase in artificial surfaces. That makes sense because it's been development. Okay, so this data here is what I was saying comes from the global sources, which is the European Space Agency's Climate Change Initiative land cover data, right? It's a ESA provides this data, so they didn't go and kind of sample this themselves. They use this data source. All right, and then you can see this change matrix of what's changed from what, right? And then this goes all through. They have a qualitative, and there's a quantitative, and then you have the qualitative assessment as well. What are the things that are driving this change from tree to the grassland? Is it land tenure, direct and indirect drivers? So you have not only the quantitative change, but what they feel is driving those changes. And it's all kind of tabular, right? So, you know, it's pretty good in that sense. Then you have strategic objective 1-2, trends in land productivity or functioning of the land. So things such as land cover class, you have the land cover productivity dynamics change. So land cover net land productivity. So this is about how productive the land is. And then you have how it's been declining or moderately or stable or what have you, right? And again, this data here comes from the Joint Research Center's Land Productivity Dynamics dataset. That's NASA's JRC. So again, this is a global data set in kilometers squared, right? Between 2000 and 2013, right? All right. And then you have the next one, I believe, is soil organic carbon. So you have the quantitative and then the qualitative assessment. So what's driving those changes in productivity? Then you have strategic objective 1-3, trends in carbon stocks above and below ground. And this is coming from Soil Grid's database of the ISRIC, World Soil Information. Again, a global data set. So everybody has access to that. And you can see here the data from 2015 to 2000, what's happened with respect to the soil organic carbon stock along those different, from those different years, how much is in the soil organic carbon stock and topsoil of tree covered, et cetera, and the changes. And then you have qualitative assessment. Okay. And then I won't go through the rest of it, but this is proportion of land that is degraded over land area. So this is related to the SDGs of land degradation neutrality, right? And then it gets into some socioeconomic stuff. So trends in population living below the population level, poverty level, et cetera. So what do you notice different about the Unccd versus Uncbd? What do you see that's different?
There's actual data.
Yes, exactly. There's data, more quantitative. Yes, more organized in terms of the goals and targets. It's more systematic. So for instance, if I asked you, say you were working at the, I don't know, you're working at the Secretariat, you're in Berlin working for the Unccd, and someone would say, well, what is the global status of land degradation amongst all the parties to your convention? Do you think you'd be able to answer that question relatively, not easily, but would you have the information to answer that question? Looks like you would, because you have, these are submitted by every party, every country that is a signatory to that convention submits this stuff, that's like this, land cover. You say, has land cover gone, has there been a bulk transfer of land cover amongst your parties from, you know, has wetlands been reduced amongst all your parties? You would have this data, right? And presumably they have some sort of central repository where they could suck this data into a database. If not, it would be relatively easy to do that. So this, you know, see what I'm saying? Like there's a big difference between how the data is gathered and structured between the Unccd and the Uncbd. I think the Uncbd is making progress because what I showed you is way more systematic than it was before. Before it was just, you know, all over the, like each country did its own thing. But I still think there's some more work that needs to be done. Okay. So this is like a report card. This is what they choose to do, like what is happening in this country, and they do this every 2 to 4 years. And then they also have a national action plan. Okay, so if I pull this up here, this is again is from Antigua and Barbuda as well. So this is their national action plan combating desertification and land degradation. So this is similar to the NBSAP that we saw for biodiversity for the convention, but it's for land degradation. It's lengthy, it's about 100 pages. There's a lot of stuff in here. So background, you have identification of degraded sites, you know, aligning national action plan with a 10-year plan, a lot of stuff related to watershed management and all this kind of stuff. So if you really wanted to learn about Antigua and what they're doing for land degradation, this is what you look at. You know, you look into this lengthy report, 100 pages, you're going to get a lot of information on this, background information in the country and so forth and so on, lots of data. All right, so that's their action plan and their report card, their affected country party report. So these national action plans are a little more less systematic in the sense that it's more related to the country. It's what is the country doing? So I wouldn't expect this country to be, say, comparable to, you know, St. Lucia's or Barbados's or whatever, right? Because it's nuanced. But I'm going to show you something at the end where that is actually occurring, where they're looking at some sort of global analysis of action plans. All right, so there we go. Uncbd, done. Unccd, done. Now we're going to move on. So you know what's going on with global land degradation, and you know what's going on with biodiversity. You have an idea of how this whole problem is being managed. Now's the big one, UNFCCC, climate change. Okay, this is the one that gets convention that receives the most attention. That's the one we hear about all the time. Much busier, more political than other conventions, it seems, at least from my experience. There seems more at stake in terms of economic consequences and so forth. All parties are required to fulfill reporting obligations. They attend the COP meetings, same thing, technical meetings as the other conventions. Fairly systematic in some respects. I wouldn't say it's as systematic as the UNCCD, but somewhat. I'm going to wager a guess we'll see a lot more quantitative data here. Well, we'll see. Yes and no. I mean, you're going to see a lot of data, but you'll see. I'm going to show you. Lots of information required here, though. Like Scott, yes, lots of information that is required. Is it as systematic as it should be? I would say no. I think we could have if you were to take an approach like UNCCD, I think that would benefit UNFCCC if they had some sort of similar type of platform. They don't currently. Lots of information required for these reports. National communications are their report card. So like the affected country party report, like the national biodiversity report, for those two conventions, UNFCCC has what's called a national communication. And that it's a national communication to the UNFCCC, which gives the status of all the actions they've been taking. What is the status of greenhouse gas emissions? What are the statuses of adaptation? Blah, 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 blah. You also have NAPS, the National Adaptation Plan. So how do they plan to adapt to climate change? The overall goal to reach below a 1.5 degree world and keep it there. That's kind of the working objective of the convention as a whole. And yeah, so I'm going to switch then, and their national determined NDCs and their NDCs. And also there's another one, the transparency documents. So something that has come up, you have your NDCs, you have their there's something new, relatively new, called the Enhanced Transparency Framework, which is more of an outline of how they're reporting on and being transparent about the reporting. I think this speaks to the falsifying of information before. How can we encourage transparency within reporting and our actions and so forth? I'm going to switch to, and you also have the BURs, biannual update reports through the UNFCCC. So we're going to, UNFCCC is a little more involved with reporting. There's a lot to it. So we have the UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Here we go. If we want to learn about it or learn more about it, we go here. And then we can go and we can browse through this and start to look at, I want to just look at we can look at the NAPs. Let's look, there's an NDCs right here. You also have RED plus submissions, so we can get into that, but let's look at the, I want to look at the national communications. I think it's the submissions portal. I don't know. Type submission. Substyle. Yeah. Find. I'm less familiar with how this website is structured. Let's get out of here. Let's look at NDCs. Let's look at let's look at country. Let's go to Iran again. Why not? Iran, bang. Topic. National communications, bang. And I thought I was going to search it, but maybe not. Oh, I think it's searching now. So we're looking for the national communications of the, let's see, NDC registration. There we go. All right, so I did the shortcut. How about we go with Turkey? How about Turkey? Everybody okay with Turkey, Thailand, Brazil? I'm just going to choose one. We'll look at a national communication. Not Canada. Canada's boring. China. Let's go Turkey. How about that? Everybody okay? Thumbs up, Turkey? Yes. I'm going. So the national communication is, there we go. National communication, you have NC7. There's a series of them, right? Depending on where they're at with things. You know, they've submitted periodically every 2 to 4 years, roughly. This was the last one was submitted on the 2019, August 26th. And it's from Turkey. And we have the English version here. NC7, there you go. You can see all of them there, but I'm just picking up. So this is the 7th national communication of Turkey under the UNFCCC. Okay, so this is like the affected country party report, like the biodiversity reports. You can see here the GEF and the UNDP. So why are these logos here? Well, this GEF paid for this. The Global Environmental Facility is a global funding body for environmental work through the World Bank. It's part of the World Bank Group, and they finance things like this, and they would have paid the cost for the consultants to prepare this report. I expect that this was produced by consultants and in-country people. And as you can see here, this is not a small report. We've got 263 pages of stuff. So let's take a closer look at what the stuff is, okay? So I'm gonna actually, let's do this. So we've got, they tend to follow, there's a guideline for the structure of the reports. So we have the executive summary, the national circumstances, which gives just basically what's going on with the country. What is the country? The climate profile, the economic profile, what do they use for energy, industry, agriculture? What is this country all about? That's what this second section is all about. The first one is a summary. Second section is about, okay, well, what's this country all about, right? Is it an industrial power, blah, 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 blah. That gives you like the context. Section number 3, inventory of greenhouse gas emissions and sinks. So this gives you then the trends, greenhouse gas emissions trends. It shows whether it's going up, down, sideways, whatever, you know, and then by sector, energy, agriculture, land use, waste, the inventory system. Okay, so if you want to see what's going on with the country, this is where you go to their last national communications, and you see this section here, as to which direction their greenhouse gas emissions are going. Their inventory system, policies and measures. So this is what they're putting in place for, like, say, energy efficient buildings, forestry practices, waste management, transport, et cetera, projections and total effects of policies, vulnerability assessment. So this is getting into more adaptation, section 6, where they talk about projections, scenarios, what they expect to see happening, trends analysis, expected impacts and vulnerability. So what sectors are going to be impacted and how. Pretty lengthy stuff. Adaptation measures. So what are they doing to adapt? Then their M&E, monitoring, reporting, and evaluation. And then also lastly, section 7 is their technological capacity and building support. So what are they doing for research? What are they doing for systematic observation? So what kind of monitoring capacity they have in the country and so forth. And then other actions taken for these countries. Lastly, you do have a section here on education, training, and public awareness. What are they doing to make the public aware? Okay, so if I were to go through this, let's just look briefly at, let's look at one of the most critical sections, which is page 56. I'm just going to really reef through this. Okay, 56. So as you can see here, as Scott noted, there is a lot more data in this. Problem is, it's not formatted in such a way that it can be systematically compared, unlike Unccd. So we can look at here, so greenhouse gas emissions by sector. Energy, you can see here what they've documented greenhouse gas emissions from fuel combustion 1990 to 2016. And you can see how that's changed over time. Total fuel consumption, you can see the proportion by sector here. What else do we got here? Electricity generation, greenhouse gas emissions from transportation. So you've seen quite a bit of increase between 2012, 2016 in transportation greenhouse gas emissions, kilotons of CO2. It's all here. Like it's all here. Industrial processes, agricultural emissions, right? We can go on and on and on through here. So if I'm not going to go through all of this stuff because it's up. We have the resources here. You can take a look at any country you can look at. One thing that will be interesting for you to look at this site here that Scott here. I'm going to just go to this quickly because this would be a good way to compare different countries. So if you look at this, that's the CBD. Let's go to the national communications. This is for Annex 1 countries. So these will be pretty similar because these will all be like fairly good, I would expect, because these are more developed countries. So you can look at each one of these, say Greece, we could go and take a look at their national communication, right? Boom. It's going to pull up that PDF and we can see in relation to Turkey, how's Greece doing? And let's just, for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to pull this up. Okay. Hellenic Republic, Ministry of Environment and Energy. This is the 7th national communication and 3rd biannual report under the UNFCCC. It's 2018. So blah, blah, blah. We're skimming through the See, they've got a little less capacity. You can tell right away. I just look at these and go, okay, well, Turkey has more firepower. They have more resources to work with. This is probably a team of 3 or 4 that was doing this. Who knows? But you can go through and they're going to have the similar sections to the report. Chapter 1, chapter 2 should be the actual greenhouse gas stuff. So I'm just going to scroll down here to go chapter 2, national circumstance. See this, the table of contents will be pretty much similar across the board. It should be fairly identical. So we can look in here, national circumstances. We can go to section 3 here, greenhouse gas inventory information is on 67. So if we want to see the trends, let's go to page 70 real quick here. Boom, 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 boom. So that's 77, 74, and here we go. So if we want to go see what's going on in Greece, we are going to go chapter 3, greenhouse gas inventory information, summary tables, and this lists total greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 to 2002. Okay, we can look at trends, factors underlying greenhouse gas emissions. We can look at probably emissions per sector, somewhere around here. Yeah, this is per sector. Energy, agriculture, waste. We can see contribution of activity sectors to greenhouse gas without land use and land cover change. So energy is a big proportion of the greenhouse gas emissions. I presume they're burning coal or something like that. Boom, boom. We can go through and get all the information we need. So, but again, look, we're just looking at Turkey and Greece. So even just two countries that would both be Annex 1 countries, so of the more developed world, these would be kind of challenging to compare, right? Because the data is in these PDFs. It's not as systematic as Unccd. Now, if we were to go just to see if we can get to non-Annex 1 countries. I just want to national communications. Annex 1. I'm trying to find non-Annex 1. Scott, do you have the non-Annex, like the Annex 2 countries? Do you have a link for that? Annex 1. So these would be countries like Ghana, Mali. I'm just going to pull this one up. Let's see. Transmitter reporting. National communications here. Annex 1. I don't want Annex 1. I'm going to just quickly search for Ghana. Oh, there we go. See, Scott's the man. He's got it like, he's on top. So fourth national communications here. I could go here. This is the one national submission to non-Annex 1 parties. So if we look at the difference between these countries, so here, look at these. These are Algeria, Andorra, Angola, Benin, Botswana, Brazil. So these are non-Annex 1 countries. So I believe Antigua will be in this one here. Antigua and Barbuda, right? So we can go here. This is their last national communication. Bang. You can take a look at this PDF and get right up to speed with what they're doing in English. And this will show you, and again, you're going to see, so this is the third national communication, Antigua and Barbuda. It's 2015 was the last one was published. So they're working on their current one right now. I know they are. And we could go through this and look, national circumstance, greenhouse gas inventory, mitigation measures, vulnerability, other information. So a little different in terms of the structure, but the key things are there, right? Mitigation measures. The greenhouse gas inventory is always a distinct section. The national circumstances are always a distinct section. And then the measures, vulnerability and assessment and adaptation is always a distinct section. Okay, so we can go through this and see what's going on with respect to changes in rainfall and what they're doing and adapting and so forth. Okay, so these are the national communications for developed quote unquote non-Annex 1 and Annex 1 countries. So if you want to learn about climate change for a country, this is where you go. What are they doing? All right. Another thing to consider is we have the nationally determined contributions, annual update reports, but another important document here is their NAPs, their national adaptation plans. Okay, so these are how countries are proposing to adapt to climate change. So it's the same thing as what we saw for other countries, these specific documents, national adaptation plans, UNFCCC, okay? So we can go here and take a look at these and let's choose, I don't know, let's choose a country, NAPs. So NAPs tend to be more from the countries that are more threatened, right? So these are the countries that have submitted them, Guatemala, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if this is interactive, but we can, let's see if we can find them, NAP Central. There we go. So if we go to the NAP Central, this is where we can actually get the NAP documents. Okay. And then let's look at national guidelines. So all these resources are for supporting NAPs. So let's go to NAPs. Here we go. So let's choose what's a country we want to look at. Anybody? Choose one of these. Laos, okay. Oops. Do they have it? I don't know if they have submitted theirs. I don't think they have it. No, Laos hasn't done it. Peru. All right. Go to Peru. Peru, here we go. It's in Spanish. We'll do it anyway. Boom. All right, so this is Peru's National Adaptation Plan that we're going to take a look at quickly. Blah, 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 blah. And this is a Plan Nacional de Adaptación al Cambio Climático del Perú. And this goes through all of the things that they're doing, managing risks and so forth, to deal with climate change. So this is, how many pages is this? It's quite, these tend to be quite lengthy documents. So we can go through and, you know, see all the things that are going into their adaptation planning. But this gives you an idea of how lengthy these parts are. So they have some maps of variation in temperature, where they expect droughts to be, and variability of climate, et cetera, et cetera. So lots of work goes into this document. And these are done by various different countries, okay? So let's look at another one that's in English so we can see. Let's do Guatemala. Oh, it's Spanish too. Let's do St. Lucia's. I know St. Lucia did a good one, 2018. Okay, so we're going to go and take a look at St. Lucia's. Here, St. Lucia's National Adaptation Plan, 2018 to 2028. Again, this is supported by UNDP. Japan helped paid for this. And then you can see here, this is good. It's well organized in St. Lucia's. National context, climate change, what's going, National Adaptation Plan process, St. Lucia's NAP, and goes through all the different things, the objectives that they're trying to achieve and so forth. So this is a 206-page document. There's a lot to this, okay? So we can rifle through this and see the country and what's going on, et cetera, et cetera. So we can go through all of this stuff just to see what's happening, right? How they're adapting to climate change. Okay, so that's a NAP is another key climate change document. All right, so lastly with climate change, you get it? We got a lot of information being gathered. So what do we do when we want to do cross-country comparisons? Well, we've seen what UNFCCC, it's going to be tricky with the national communications, just to the way they're submitted and structured. They're all PDF documents. However, for NAP documents, fortunately, we have a group called the ISD that is doing the work to analyze the NAPs. They're part of this thing called the NAP Global Network, and they have been doing an analysis of all the NAPs, and they are doing a meta-analysis and pulling out key information about the NAPs for each of the countries. So you can look at this. And this is a by country. You can see, let's go to, who are we looking at? St. Lucia. So let's look at Caribbean, St. Lucia. So we can look, and they've analyzed St. Lucia's NAP. What we just looked at the PDF and said, okay, well, what's this year submission, time horizon, blah, 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 general structure. And they've picked out all the data, the purpose, the vision, and so forth, et cetera, enabling factors, all this kind of stuff. They've analyzed this for each NAP that's been created and established key criteria, okay? Alignment, is it aligned with the SDGs? Sendai framework mentioned, no, it's not, blah, 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 blah. So they've done this analysis, and they've then looked at trends. So what if we want to look at across all the NAPs? The number of NAPs is 30 that's been submitted, and we could look at the number of countries with updated NAPs. We can look at climate information. So how many NAPs recognize wildfires, glacier melt, sea level rise, et cetera, adaptation approach, specific adaptation mechanisms, gender responsive, 17 out of 30. A lot of summary statistics that have been gathered and then processed and visualized, okay, on this system that has been developed by us. We developed this with the ISD right there. So there is some work going on with systematic analysis of NAPs across the world of all the countries that have developed them. But again, that's a whole kind of task unto itself that is necessary. And this is helpful, this kind of summary information, for when looking at kind of adaptation as a whole in vulnerable parts of the world. Okay. So this is, you know, it's necessary work, but it takes effort to do that. All right, so that's UNFCCC. SDGs. Lastly, I know we're going super long, but hopefully this is interesting to you. So how does this fit? We've got land degradation, we've got biodiversity, we've got climate change, major issues, major reporting, lots of information going into, but we always hear about the SDGs, right? Sustainable Development Goals. So the SDGs, again, are coming from this site here, which is the sustainabledevelopment.org. They evolved from the Millennium Development Goals and the other Rio conventions. So initially it was the MDGs back in 2000, Millennium Development Goals. And then these new kind of set of 17 broad-reaching goals were established for the time horizon to 2030. That's the time horizon. So I'm going to just go to this SDG site here. This is the knowledge platform of the SDGs, where you can learn more about this. And you can see they have a global sustainable development report, which does a summary of how things are going with respect to the SDGs. And then they also have a description of the actual SDGs themselves. So these are 17 relatively broad goals. Poverty, zero hunger, good health, blah, 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 blah. And we can go into each one of these. So the main environmental ones tend to be life below water. So that's a marine one, life on land, 13, climate action. And then I would consider SDG 6, clean water, that's an important one as well. So if we looked at, say, let's stick on life on land, we can go here and we can see within this SDG, we can see this is the goal: protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems, sustainability managed forests, blah, 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 blah. So we can see within this that we have like some high level statistics and so forth, but also we have sub indicators within this. So I don't know if they're available here, but within this 15, we have targets and indicators. Here we go. So we have 15.1 by 2020, ensure conservation measures and so forth. And then we have the specific indicators: forest area, proportion of important sites. We have 15.2, we have sustainable land management. 15.3, combat desertification. Doesn't that sound familiar? What does that sound like? That sounds like the Unccd, doesn't it? Right? So what are the indicators? Proportion of land that is degraded over total land area. That looks familiar. Where did we see that? 15.3.1. We saw that exact data submitted as part of the Unccd reporting by each party. Okay, you see there is some connection between these things. Land degradation is one of the clearest examples of where the SDGs and the 3 conventions, biodiversity, climate change, and land degradation, fit together. Right in this one here, 15.3.1, probably the most synergistic indicator of all global environmental reporting right there. Okay, and each one of these is broken down. You can see the specific indicators, red list index, etc. You can go through all of this stuff, and you have these same indicators for each one of the goals. So if I were to go back to, let's choose another one, climate action, for instance. Let's go to SDG 13, right? We want to go here and we want to look at targets and indicators. We can look at strength and resilience, integrate climate change measures, blah, 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 blah. So this would be 13.2.1, number of countries with NDCs, nationally determined contributions, long-term strategies, national adaptation plans, and adaptation communications as reported to the UNFCCC. There we go, right? We just took a look at all this stuff that was on the UNFCCC site. So you can see here, again, very close connection between SDG 13 and what's going on with the UNFCCC. And then we have 13.2.2 total greenhouse gas emissions per year, right? That's a little more specific, measurable, right? Whereas these are more about what actions are being taken. All right. So the SDGs are this kind of broad, those are the environmental ones, but we also have, if we wanted to look at, say, I don't know, no poverty, right? Quality education, let's go to that one. We could look at quality education, see, okay, let's look at targets and indicators, and this is going to be a lot about literacy and so forth. Ensure access of all women and men to affordable, quality technical education. Okay, participation rate of youth and adults in formal and non-formal education in the previous 12 months by sex. So it's sex disaggregated, right? Which is important to calculate within these countries. Okay, so this is a little more of a socioeconomic development oriented indicator. Okay, so you can go through all of these sub-indicators and targets and goals and see how a country is doing. So where do you do that? So where do you go and see what's the report card for the SDGs? Well, you need to look at something called a VNR, right? It's a voluntary national review. Okay, so we can look at, let's go and quickly find documents. I want to just take a look at Uruguay. There's Uruguay's. Let's choose one. Let's try and find, let's do Canada. How about that? Oh my gosh. SIDS, no. I want to find I'm going to just do this the old-fashioned way. Okay, Voluntary National Review Canada. You can see it here, or sustainabledevelopment.org Canada. So we go to that same website. This is where we get the actual reports. So this is a voluntary national review on 2018 is when it was published, the last one. Documents and reports. We can actually look at the national reports. Where is the actual report itself? Which are all the indicators. Let me see there. Full report, here we go. This is the full report 2018 in English. It's in French as well if you wish to read it in French. And we can see this for any country. This is their voluntary national review. Canada's implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, voluntary national review. And we can go through this. There's our good friend Justin Trudeau, and we can look at each one of the SDGs goals and see what actions have been taken for each one of them, scrolling through this. I'm curious to see how much data is there, but of course there is not much. Looks like it's mostly anecdotal. There's some data. No, here we go. So we can look at income rates. So let's go to what we were looking at before, which is 13, right? This is for, that's clean water and sanitation. That'd be an interesting one, clean water and sanitation for communities that don't have it in Canada. Here we go. Goal by goal actions, climate action, blah, 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 blah. I'd like to see a chart with, and of course we don't have it here. Why do we not have a chart with Canada's greenhouse gas emissions? Why do you think that is? Answer me that, folks. Why do you think that is? Because we're not so. There we go. Scott, you're going to get a gold badge for tonight. You're helping me out big time. We're not doing so hot. We're not doing so hot. It's not something we really want to put on a graph for this report, it seems. But technically it should be there. I'm curious to see if we were to look at another country, whether or not, I mean, why don't we just try and do that? I'm gonna, I'm gonna look at St. Lucia. Why not? Let's go back to St. Lucia. They should report theirs. I'm curious to see if St. Lucia has there. Okay, we're going to go to St. Lucia. Boom, it's going to pull up their reports. All right, here we go. VNR 2019, that's when they produced their voluntary national review. All right, here's St. Lucia's voluntary national review. There's Prime Minister, progress and goals and targets, 13, 33. Let's see if they actually put some data there. 33. SDG climate change. Okay. Lots of anecdotal. So they didn't either. They didn't put a chart in there. They did put a little more specific targeted number of deaths, disaster risk reduction, et cetera, et cetera. but not as much concrete information, it seems, on this one. I'd have to take a closer look, but you see that, I mean, if you really wanted to see what the status of the emissions were, then you go to their national communication. Okay. So let's go back to this. Typically, so in a country, if we're to like sit down and see how this all happens, in a country, you're going to have the focal point for the UNFCCC climate change. You're going to have a separate focal point for biodiversity, separate focal point for land degradation. Usually, sometimes they're the same person, depending on the country or same group. Often they'll be separate, especially for bigger countries, because it's a big job. So you have those people doing their reporting to each one of those conventions. And then, of course, you also have these VNRs being created. And the VNRs typically are produced not by the Ministry of Environment or whomever. They're usually done by the Department of Statistics in the country. So in Canada, I think, I'm not sure in Canada, but I know for sure in St. Lucia, as well as in Antigua and Barbuda, it was the Department of Statistics that was producing the VNR. Because they're the ones that gather all of the census data and all of it. It's not just about the environment. They're doing poverty data, education data, livelihood data, all that stuff's gathered by statistics. So they produce it. So when we're looking at this as a whole, just to kind of like put this all together, the challenge is, well, how do we like get a good picture of what's going on in the world? Service indicators, greenhouse gas. This, okay, Scott, I'm going to share that in a bit. I'm just going to summarize this. How do we know how well we're doing? Well, we have the scientific reports, which is kind of like, that tells us what the status of the world is. So like the IPCC for climate change, IPBES, Intergovernmental Panel for Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services for biodiversity. And then we have these national reports, some separate like biodiversity reports that are done and so forth, and global, the health of the environment, state of the environment report. Those are like assessment reports. And then in terms of like documentation of where countries are at, we have to go to the different reports submitted by the parties to these conventions, okay? And to see what's going on at a country level. Now, we're not quite, I don't think, at the level where we can do good meta-analysis. No, we're starting to, like what I showed you for adaptation plans, I think that's good. What we've done with the ISD has really done the work on that stuff. We just did the design of the software. I think that's a good sign because we're starting to see trends. We can say, okay, well, what's happening with gender? Well, we're seeing good coverage of gender in adaptation plans. But about this factor, we're getting some data. We don't quite have the same level of analytical capability for climate change across the board as of yet, nor do we have the same thing for biodiversity across the board yet. However, I remain optimistic that we're gathering that data. It's there, as you've seen in these reports. We have these processes in place, and I would say that that's something we need to do, because if we're really going to kind of have a handle on what these problems are, of course, as those that are studying environmental management tools, no, you cannot manage what you don't measure. You can't like benchmark progress without having some sort of like summative statistics and data to look at. But it's kind of there. I mean, we have some frameworks, but the challenge is some of it's a little more anecdotal. And then also there's these synergies between these different conventions as well. So I think hopefully you're starting to see that this is kind of a complicated task governing the global commons, that it's not that easy. But we do have some tools in place to help manage this stuff. And what you see in the media with the fires, I mean, this is all problematic stuff for sure. But in terms of what our job is, and I say our as in you as working professionals and those that are studying to become environmental professionals, is to like weed through that stuff and look at issues like this to see, okay, well, what do we need? What data we need? What's good? What's bad? Okay, well, this is going to be helpful for this, but we really should have some quantitative data here, or it's just not possible to have quantitative data for this stuff. So we need some means of like summarizing qualitative data, right? All right, so I'm going to just go to this link from Scott. He's my co-pilot tonight. Scott's killing it tonight. Scott just earned like an A+. 7th national communication. What is this? Environmental indicators. Here we go. Greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, good. Here we go. So this is good. So this is a good summary of 1990 to 2020. This must be new because I haven't seen this yet. So this must be relatively new. This is regional intensity. Good. Excellent. Now we're starting to see this. So we can see, we can see progress here. So this is coming from Environment and Climate Change Canada. Monique, I work with CC Group with ECCC that puts out the indicators that you linked, takes the UNFG's data and turns the data into trends that are accessible to the public, plain language, but EC does not do the VNR. No, voluntary national reviews are done by, I think, it's not StatsCan. It is, what is it? Social. Just a sec here. Just a sec. It's that Ministry of Social Development, I think. Who produces it? Employment and Social Development, that's it. ESDC. Yeah, ESDC produces it. So Duclos was he is still the minister. I think Jean-Yves Duclos was the minister. I think he may still be, I'm not sure where he's at. But yeah, they produce it. It makes sense. They're drawing the information from StatsCan, I believe. So this is good that we have the greenhouse gas emissions inventory available. I don't know, when did that get up? Because this is first I've seen of this. This must be within the last 2 years that this was developed.
I was on assignment with them fall 2021, and it's a relatively old indicator. Like they've been doing it for over 15 years, but they had just updated it. I actually work with the people that make the national inventory report that we submit to the UNFCCC.
Right, the national.
So yeah, so basically they just got that data in the fall, so it's been updated recently.
How long has this been available online though, this part of the website? Because I haven't seen this before. I don't recall seeing this. Maybe I just missed it. I'm not sure. I don't recall seeing this like publicly available.
I think maybe for probably 2 years. Like I've known about it since about my 3rd year of my undergrad, so around like 2018.
Yeah, I think it was must have been 2019 when they started doing this, because this is another good thing that has been recently done, which is the climate model output, which some of you may have seen. Climate output Canada. It's called, I forget what the name of the site is, Climate Canada or something like that. Is that it? Climate Scenarios Canada? It's pretty slick. That's not it. I think it's this. Where is this? It's really great. And this is since 2018, I think it came out. Where is it? I want to show it to you because it's really cool. Climate model scenarios, is that it? Or this is the model data. Where is it? Perhaps. No, this is too technical. There's a, there we go. This is it. This is what I'm looking for. So this is the climatedata.ca, which is very helpful for those that are involved in this stuff. You can download and view the data, so you can go and search any place. And let's look at, I don't know, Lac Saint Jean. Oh. Come on, how can you not have Lac Saint Jean there? Let's choose another place. Come on, someone select a city or town in the chat. Ottawa.
Winnipeg.
Winnipeg. I'll go with Winnipeg. The peg. All right. So this is great. Instantly, it shows you Winnipeg, gives you the information for Winnipeg. The summary 1951-1980 period, 2.2 on average, 3.4 from 1981 to 2010. Precipitation levels, et cetera, extreme events, well, the hottest day, stuff like this. You can look at mean temperature. I mean, this is fantastic. I love this. This is really awesome what they're doing. Mean temperature, max temperature, this kind of stuff. And then I believe you can actually look at they have variables, hottest days, sectors. I mean, they have a lot of analyze. I'm seeing some climate maps. Analyze climate data, grid cells. Okay, let's choose select locations. Okay, let's do that. Select a location. I don't know, a watershed. Why not? Click to location. We're going to go. Let's go around. I'm going to get killed on my geography here. Somewhere around. There we go. Let's go southwestern Manitoba. That's the watershed we're going to look at. Customize your variables. Wet days. Let's look at what? Days above Tmax, maybe. I don't know. How about that? This is greater than. This analysis returns the number of days where daily maximum temperature is greater than. I don't know. What should we say? How about 20? Just to be safe, that should give us some good data. But daily maximum temperature is greater than 20. Okay, that should give us a lot of data actually. Okay. Then we can go choose a time frame. Start year 1950 to 2025. And then, oh, you have to go and send a request and it's going to do the processing. Okay, I mean, forget that. Anyway, this is what we can do a lot of stuff with this, which is pretty impressive. I met the people that did this. They're really keen on it. It's great. It's very cool. So there we go. We do have, so we've made some good progress in Canada over the last few years, I'd say. This website in my system, very cool. They even have it for the hamlet close to where I grew up, which is not expecting. Great. Yeah, I know it's really fantastic. I look at this for Nelson. This was also very helpful in the consulting realm for sure. Like say, if you have to do some consulting, look at climate adaptation. Let's say we got hired by someone to do some adaptation planning for, let's say Nelson, BC, good old my hometown. We can look at Nelson, BC and see, okay, well, what are we expecting to see? Annual values, that kind of stuff. We can see, look at this. These are the projections, right? So you can see what's expected based on different emission scenarios in Nelson, right? Very helpful. Precipitation, we can view this on the map if we want to, right? So this is going to give us some geospatial. These are coarse resolution, but this is climate model output. So it's relatively coarse. I think it's 8 kilometers, something like that, if it's not downscaled. So that's it. It's a great tool. We can change the opacity of this. If we want to go light, we can see little details in there. Can zoom out. Okay, I'm going to close that off. And then we can change the time period. So if you want to see, okay, well, in what do we expect it to be like in 2080? Expect it to be a little warmer, right? View data by health regions, watersheds. There's the watersheds, which is great. Okay, so that's a nice little tool we have at our disposal in Canada as well. So what do you think? Did you learn anything tonight? We just went through like global environmental stuff, what's going on. If you want to kind of pin down any country and get to work on them quickly, you know where to look, what documents to grab for degradation, biodiversity, climate change, their sustainable development reports. From those, you can go at specific information. We also know the global picture and see, okay, well, what are our challenges and opportunities? What actually do we know? Because you think about it, we say, okay, well, what are the big problems? Well, we need to look at those reports because all this time I viewed them as separate pieces, but they actually interconnected. Yeah, so there's There's some close connections to the SDGs. So typically in the policy world, they'll say environmental SDGs are connected. So 13, 14, 13, 14, 15, and then 6 to some degree. Those you can map to the MEAs very clearly. Like those are explicit connections between those SDG indicators and the MEA indicators. The other ones, not so much, like education and poverty and so forth necessarily, but when you start to look at vulnerability assessments for adaptation planning, then you need that vulnerability data as well. Nothing operates in complete isolation. Would you be able to post the slide deck in Moodle? Yep, I'll post a slide deck in Moodle. And then I will also post this. This will be recorded. This is recorded. It's going to be on YouTube. So there you go. This just gives you at least like a bit of kind of connections between what's going on with the convention level reporting. We didn't talk about how this relates to municipal level planning, but that would be almost a separate thing altogether. But it is important. This isn't like divorced from the local. That's the thing I want to leave you with, is that just because all this stuff is happening at seemingly a macro and mile high perspective, there is a very close connection with what's going on in the ground, and we can do work at the local level which connects to the SDGs and the MEA reports. That's the actual real goal, is to connect local action with global outputs, indicators, progress, and objectives. All right, with that, thank you very much. I'm going to stop sharing. Stop recording.